Economically, the North and the South are following quite different paths in the first half of the 19th century.
The North became industrialized, the South remained agricultural. That's how people understand the key economic difference between these two regions. And the reasons go deep. One of the reasons has to do with a relatively even distribution of settlement among families in the North, and there was lots of water courses for water power. But more than that, the North was a place where there was a vast amount of technical knowledge. Technological changes in the 19th century allowed for much greater energy, much greater work energy to come out of the mills, really the blueprint for the modern factory.
It would be a myth to think that technology alone caused the Industrial Revolution in the United States. For one thing, factories in the United States started out not being mechanized at all. A factory was just a way to organize the labor of a business. Started out in businesses like shoe manufacturing or cloth manufacturing, bringing together people who would have been small contractors or worked in their own homes, both men and women, under one roof, funded by a corporation that owned the products of the labor instead of the family owning the products of the labor. When you add to that system of organization, that business idea of a factory, something like mechanization that can allow you to do more work more quickly, then you start to get the kind of industrial development that we might associate more with something called an industrial revolution.
It used to be that the shoemaker would do everything. He would take your order face to face, he would trace your foot on a piece of paper, and then he would go to work cutting out the leather and making the whole thing, and then he would be the one who took your money when you came to pick it up. Under the new system, they use standardized measurements. They don't measure your foot. Somebody cuts hundreds of uppers all at the same time. Somebody else stitches the sole together. Somebody else sews the upper to the sole. And finally, you have hundreds of shoes which go into a barrel and go onto one of those canal boats and go out to Cincinnati, and then somebody buys them in the general store. Well, the worker who took enormous pride in being able to make a whole shoe is suddenly given the choice of just sewing soles together or finding another job. And it turns out that sewing a sole together requires so little skill that you will pay that person much, much less than the highly skilled shoemaker who could make the whole thing.
Industrial development also begins to take hold in the old Northwest.
Cincinnati and St. Louis, and then later Chicago, become centers of activities like meatpacking, manufacturing rather than simply agricultural processing organizations. They also start to become centers for manufacturing of agricultural implements. I mean, the famous example, of course, is McCormick and the Reaper Works in Chicago. And so these cities start to acquire roles as both processors of agricultural produce and distributors of agricultural technology.
And there's a lot of debate among historians of what's really driving this change. Is it demand among consumers for more goods, or is it the supply of more goods? So if you have new technologies, for example, it allows you to produce a greater amount of cotton or a greater number of chairs, but that doesn't matter if no one wants to buy such things.